got accepted into a prestigious university and expected my parents to be proud. But instead they demanded I reject the offer because my cousin didn't get in and they didn't want tension, forcing me to choose between my dreams and their approval. I'm 18F, a recent high school graduate, and I guess I should start by saying I grew up in a small Ohio town, the kind of town where everyone knows everyone else's business, and parents' expectations carry more weight than winter snow. My parents, Robert 55M and Linda 52F, were loving, in their own fashion, but also the type of individuals who measure success in terms of appearances and familial togetherness. I also have an older brother, Mark 21M, who moved away for college a few hours away and now works a part-time job at a tech store while he attempts to sort out his life. Then there's my cousin, Alex 18M, who's technically the same age as me but has always been the golden child in our extended family. Or at least that's what my parents tell me. Smart, charming, a bit entitled, and never short on praise from our family members. Looking back, I think much of my life has been overshadowed by him unintentionally. But more on that later. So yeah, I had a relatively average childhood, nothing luxurious but comfortable. My dad works middle management at a manufacturing company, and my mom is a nurse. Good solid workers, dependable, and very protective of family, sometimes to the point where logic and justice get warped around. So here's the memory that won't leave me alone. It was late May of my senior year, and I was sitting on my bed, staring at the Princeton University acceptance letter like it was a magic trick, folded up inside the envelope with my name stamped in that crisp, official font. My hands were shaking, for real, and a surge of pride and disbelief washed over me. I had spent years putting myself into schoolwork, clubs, volunteering, and late-night essays, all in the hopes that I would be able to go somewhere I'd adore and challenge myself. I had dreamed of informing my parents, their smiles, maybe even tears, and then imagining my life there, the libraries, the debates, the dorms, the freedom. I had dreamed about this for years, and I knocked on the door to my parents' bedroom, envelope in hand, rehearsing the words over and over again in my head. Mom, Dad, I got into Princeton. For half a second, everything was perfect. My mom looked up from her knitting, eyes sparkling, and my dad, holding his cup of coffee, gave me a quick smile. But then, it started. My mom's expression altered, subtly at first, like a cloud passing over a sunny late afternoon. That's wonderful, sweetie, she said, but her tone lacked the pride I'd anticipated. My dad put his mug down and leaned back, rubbing his forehead. Princeton, huh? He said slowly, and there was doubt, a hesitation that knotted my stomach. You know, your cousin Alex didn't get in. I paused, my words wedged between excitement and confusion. I hadn't even considered Alex at that moment. I had been so absorbed in my own triumph. But evidently, to them, that was all that was important. Well, yeah, I know, I tried tentatively. But I worked really hard and my mom interrupted me, a hand on her chest as if in apology for having to say something painful. We just don't want any family tension, sweetie. It would not look right if one child goes to Princeton and Alex doesn't. You know how his parents would feel. It felt like I had been punched. I had anticipated pride, celebration, perhaps even a hug that would last a little longer. But instead I was feeling my own dreams being questioned, almost discounted, as if my success were secondary to family politics. I tried to protest, tried to argue that I didn't make decisions based on what other people did or didn't get, that I had earned this. But both my parents had this expression, this strange, fixed look on their faces, that showed this wasn't up for discussion. My father said, "We think perhaps you should reconsider. Think about Alex. Think about the family. We prefer it if you didn't." And that's when the guilt started to creep in, slow and insidious. I'd always been the good one, the kid who kept the peace, who didn't make waves. But this was different. This wasn't some chore or little favor. It was my whole future. I remember sitting on the floor, envelope clutched to my chest, and suddenly I was shrinking, as if my own ambition was threatening, selfish, even shameful. My mom knelt beside me, gently stroking my hair. "We just don't want to hurt anyone, sweetie. We love you." I nodded, barely able to speak. Because what do you say when the people you love are asking you to betray your dreams? I went around in a daze of confusion and tension for the next several days. I tried talking to Mark, my brother, hoping he'd be able to provide me with some understanding, maybe even support me. Yet he hesitated, caught between sympathy for me and not wanting to upset our parents. He said, "I know why you're upset, but maybe just this once it's best to let it slide. You know how Mom and Dad get about Alex." His words, gently spoken as they were nails in my chest. I'd always thought of my brother as my life partner, the one who'd protect me, and here he was, advising caution. And I couldn't blame him, he had his own part to play. But it made me feel more isolated than I'd ever been. And then there was the family gathering with cousins, aunts, and uncles, where my parents nonchalantly dropped Alex's rejection. I just sat there, smiling, playing normal, as every joke and laugh around me appeared to mock me with the awareness that my joy was somehow wrong, undeserved. Alex himself was present, blissfully unaware of the firestorm his name had caused, chatting about nothing in general, and I had to bite my tongue to refrain from saying how unfair it all was. I remember catching my mom's eye across the table, and she smiled at me, small smile, like she was proud of me in a way that she couldn't verbalize. That smile hurt more than anything, because I saw the love there, but also expectation, pressure, the unspoken demand that I offer myself up for someone else's ease. I barely slept that night, laying there staring at the ceiling, flipping the envelope over and over in my hands. I thought about Princeton, the campus, the programs, the friends I'd make, and I thought about Alex, about my parents trying to shield him from disappointment, and I felt this terrible, impossible tug-of-war in my chest. Pride, guilt, hope, fear, and obligation fought with each other, and I realized that no one could tell what the right choice was, not even me. And at that moment, I knew something fundamental had shifted. My parents had always been my shelter, the ones who guided me, nurtured me, loved me, but now their idea of love felt like a cage. The next morning, I tried to act normal, like nothing was wrong, but it was not possible. Breakfast was silent except for the clinking of dishes, and my mom kept staring at me like she wanted to say something but could not find the words. I watched my dad's jaw tighten, and I realized, not for the first time, that my parents were human too, scared, flawed, and desperate to trade family harmony at the cost of my happiness. I spent the day walking around the house, not even brave enough to look at the envelope that sat on my desk like a reminder of what was being asked. I give up. I even considered keeping it someplace, like hiding it from myself, because to open it and imagine my life at Princeton made my chest physically ache with longing. I wanted it so badly, but I also wanted the approval of my parents, which was now conditional, seemingly unattainable without compromising a piece of myself. I tried to talk with Alex later that day, hoping that if he knew I was hurting, he'd say something and we could find a way out of this without anyone getting hurt. I went to his room, where he had headphones on, involved in some game, and I hesitated for a moment. He looked up and grinned, with no clue to the storm inside me. "Hey, congrats," he said casually. "Princeton, huh? That's wonderful." I hesitated, shocked at his lack of jealousy, and my chest tightened. "Thanks," I whispered, my voice about to crack. I had to tell him that my parents were insisting that I decline the offer, but I couldn't. Not only did I not wish to make him uneasy, but I did not know if I could even voice it aloud without breaking down in tears. I left his room in a rush, the world swirling around me, my own dreams entangled with all the other people's expectations in such a way as to make my stomach twist. That evening, my parents called me into the living room, the envelope still clutched in my hand. "We need to talk," my dad said, sitting down in his recliner, the weight of authority heavy in his tone. My mom sat beside him, hands folded, face carefully expressionless. "We've been thinking," my dad started, and I braced myself for the words that would follow, the words I had dreaded and imagined in every possible situation. "We really think it's best if you don't go to Princeton. We don't want any tension with Alex, and we believe you can be just as successful elsewhere." My heart sank. I wanted to scream, to fling the envelope halfway across the room, to shout that this was not fair, that my life didn't exist to make everyone else comfortable. But instead I sat there, trembling, and tried to think of some words that would do justice to both my dreams and their expectations. I wondered why they cared so much, why my acceptance was suddenly a problem. My mother sighed, looking older and smaller than I remembered, her shoulders stooped. "It's not that we don't want you to succeed," she said quietly. We don't want family drama. You know how Alex can be, and his parents, well, they'll take notice, and it would hurt everyone if you went, and he didn't." Her tone was kind, but her words cut like a knife. It felt like my own family was asking me to erase my own happiness in order to spare someone else's disappointment. I considered my life, my efforts, the nights I stayed up finishing essays when other people were going out partying, and suddenly it all felt almost worthless if I was going to throw it away to make other people comfortable. I didn't sleep that night either. I sat on my bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining myself on the Princeton campus. I could see the students walking among the ivy-covered buildings, professors lecturing, study groups late at night, the excitement of new friends and experiences. And then I considered telling my parents no, and the guilt afterward, the look in their eyes that I had disappointed them, that I had chosen myself over family. I was being pulled in ways I never imagined. The next few days were filled with muffled kitchen fights, tense dinner quiet, and my parents telling me to think about family carefully. Whenever I mentioned Princeton, each time, I felt my hope disappear, replaced with anxiety and a sense of betrayal. Not of them, exactly, but of my aspirations. And then there was the time I tried to reach a school guidance counselor, Ms. Reynolds, during the day, whom I completely trusted. I explained what was happening, in a whisper really, for fear of being overheard. She listened carefully, shaking her head, and then told me something that I will never forget. You have to live your life, Emily. Your parents love you, but love doesn't mean giving up everything you want. Sometimes the hardest thing is choosing yourself. Her voice echoed in my mind for days, a little spark of courage against the stifling pressure. But even when I thought about it, I felt guilty. Could I really choose myself when it would make my parents so unhappy? Was my own happiness worth the stress it would put them through? Family gatherings were more strained after that. Every gathering was a reminder that my achievement was somehow a threat, and I started to withdraw, not discussing college, even with the friends who were unaware of the entire scenario. I started to keep my letter of acceptance in a drawer, opening it only when I was alone, imagining the life that would never be. I tried to convince myself that there might be some other way, one that would please everyone. But whenever I did, a sinkhole formed in my stomach. Saying no to Princeton, the school I had dreamed of attending since I was 12, felt like a loss of part of myself. And the life-changing discussion, the one with my parents alone in the living room, late in the evening, I could discern the worry etched on their faces, yet also the obstinacy of their belief that they were doing the right thing. My mom said, "We just want what's best for the family. You're so young, Emily. There will be other opportunities." But I knew there wouldn't be. Not like this. Not after all I had done to be here. I wished I could scream, cry, beg, but instead I felt a hollow ache, the weight of their expectations pressing down on me like something physical. And in that moment I knew that this wasn't just about college. It was about identity, loyalty, and the scorching awareness that sometimes the very people who love you best will also require the worst of you. The following week was spent living in a daze. Every day I'd wake up with this envelope on my desk, waiting for me to open it, to envision my future, to deal with the impossible choice that was being thrust upon me. My parents tried to act as if everything were normal, but the tension was palpable, nearly suffocating. I started isolating myself, wandering into my room more and more, walking the block just to have a few minutes of quiet time where I could think without criticism. I even started journaling again, something I had not done in years, venting about my thoughts, my aspirations, my irritations, because it seemed the only way to get it all sorted out in my head. I spoke of Princeton, of the late nights studying for AP tests, the volunteer work in the hospital, the debate tournaments, all that I had put into this dream, and how suddenly it felt like everything was being threatened. I sat with my cousin Alex in the coffee shop one afternoon, attempting not to be too matter-of-fact, although my heart was pounding. I told myself I just wanted a friendly conversation, to talk to him about what he was planning on doing during the summer or what classes he was considering taking the following year. But the moment I saw him, so suavely charming and confident, I couldn't stifle the words. "Alex, do you know that my parents are saying I shouldn't go to Princeton?" His eyebrows leapt upwards in amazement, and for an instant, I expected him to turn it all around himself. But he leaned back, taking deep breaths. "Wow, that's really unfair," he breathed. "I mean, it's not your fault. You deserve it. I never even thought about how this would affect you." There was a silence, and then he shrugged. "Trust me, Emily, you should do what's in your best interest. My parents would understand. Or at least I would hope that they would." Having him say that was like a lifeline thrown to troubled waters. It allowed me to realize that my parents wanting to protect him from disappointment wasn't the same as Alex himself wanting me to abandon my aspirations. But even as I felt that flicker of hope, the guilt returned, pressing hard. I envisioned my mother's tears, my father's disappointed face, and a lump formed in my throat. Could I actually do this to them? Could I pursue my dreams knowing it would break them so badly? I paced late that night, lying awake in my room, imagining everything that might occur, me at Princeton, with my freedom tinged with guilt, me at home, taking a local scholarship and feeling safe but empty. I was trapped in an odyssey from which there was no escape, and each choice seemed impossible. Days blurred into a tense round of school, dinner at home, and silent haggling within my own mind. I tried to probe my parents gently, talking of the opportunities Princeton would offer me, the scholarships, the classes that were a good match for my interests. They heard me, but their expressions were unreadable, polite but unshakable. "We just want you to think about the family," my father intoned, as if it were an incantation. My mother added, "Emily, sometimes love requires giving up for others." Those words, meant to be comforting, were shackles. I loved them. I still do. But love cannot be a prison. And yet, to the very core of my being, cried out that I could not abandon them in such an absolute manner. Then came the breaking point. It was a Saturday evening, and the house was quiet only for the soft hum of the fridge. Princeton pamphlets were scattered across my bed, scribbles about dorms and staff, campus life. All I could concern myself with my life there. My parents were sitting in the living room, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of determination mixed with terror. I had to confront this head on. I breathed deeply and entered the room, gripping my chest as if it were full of all my life. "Mom, Dad, I need my own choice. I stated, shaking voice. I earned it. I worked for it. I understand that you are concerned about Alex and family, but I just can't give up my future for the protection of feelings that don't even belong to me. I have a dream of going to Princeton. My mother's eyes brimmed over with tears, and my father locked his jaw. For a moment, the room was frozen in time. I could almost hear my heartbeat echoing. Emily, we want the best for them all, my mother whispered, her voice breaking. I nodded, understanding the seriousness of their concern, but my resolve was not shaken. I know, Mom, and I appreciate it, but the best for me is to follow my dreams. I promise I'll be good, I'll be careful, I'll be there, but I can't. I can't stay home out of guilt. My dad's hand also twitched, like it hurt to go and touch me but didn't know how. He sat there for what felt like a really long time without saying anything, only staring at me, and I felt a sense of hope and fear. The succeeding days were tense, with muffled words and unspoken quarrels, but slowly, I noticed infinitesimal changes. My parents did not immediately approve, but they stopped speaking of Alex as soon as the word Princeton was uttered. They listened more seriously, nodded at my plans, even smiled distantly when I talked about dorm rooms or summer orientation. It was not perfect, but it was progress. I recognized that choosing my dreams wasn't losing them. It was figuring out how to live my life on my own terms, yet maintaining the love and attachment that mattered most. I had no idea what the summer would bring, if the family drama would boil over once more, or how Alex would cope with all of this once I was actually off to college, but for the first time, I felt a glimmer of freedom. That freedom, however, was imparted with guilt and expectation. I knew I was embarking on a life-altering chapter, one that I had spent years preparing for, but the pressure of my parents' expectations followed me. All those acceptance letters that I had dreamed of, all those campuses that I had fantasized about visiting, now seemed both a promise and a challenge. Could I thrive, flourish, and stay grounded as I navigated the complicated weave of family duty and personal want? I had no idea, but I knew, maybe for the first time, that life was a matter of the choices you make, sometimes painful, unavoidable, and uncompromisingly your own. And as I grasped the envelope again, I knew I wasn't just reading a letter. I was opening the door to my own future, even if that involved walking into tension, uncertainty, and harsh realities. In the morning I finally did make up my mind. I remember feeling a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. I sat at my desk, Princeton letter on it, sunbeams streaming through my window, and I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. My parents stood in the kitchen, their low voices discussing something mundane, unaware of my inner storm. I thought of the late nights of months, the endless essays, the volunteer work, and the debates that had led to this moment. I thought of the countless moments of doubt about myself, the little victories that had strengthened my confidence, and the view of my life on that campus, the life that I had fantasized about repeatedly in my imagination. I understood at that moment that nothing could ever be taken from me but my own choice, and for the first time, I understood the weight of my own agency. When my parents came into the living room with me, envelope trembling in my hand, they looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and concern. I could feel the common hesitation, the love that was obscured by worry, and I knew that what I was about to tell them would shift the energy within our family for all time. Mom, Dad, I've made up my mind, I started, my tone growing stronger as I uttered the words aloud. I'm attending Princeton. I know this will be hard for you. I know it's difficult due to Alex, but this is my life, my dream, and I can't give it up. I love you, and I want you to be proud of me, but I have to pursue my path. My mom blinked, her eyes welling up with tears, and my dad's mouth sealed itself into a thin line. There was so much silence that I could have sworn I heard it breathe around me. And then my mother did at last speak, voice shaking. Emily, we're scared, but we believe you've deserved this. We can't stop you from living. My father slowly nodded, and I saw relief and pride behind the barriers of fear. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the celebration I'd imagined in my fantasies, but it was consent, a hesitant permission to enter my own life. I embraced them both fiercely, the tug-of-war of happiness and guilt churning within me, and for the first time understood that love is not always easy. It sometimes demands courage and choice. The weeks that followed blurred into a whirl of preparation, forms, financial aid forms, packing, orientation schedules. My parents helped as far as they could, still low-key, still reserved, but gradually allowing me to set the pace. Even Alex, in a quiet conversation with me, admitted that he had selfishly feared losing out from my success, but stood by me now. That was a wake-up call, a reminder that sometimes the things we attribute to others as their fears are far larger than life. I knew, too, that my parents' overprotectiveness, annoying as it had been, was because of love. It didn't excuse the pain of their initial reaction, but it allowed me to forgive, and to see them as human beings, rather than just authority figures. The night before I left for Princeton, we sat up together in the living room. My mother made me pasta, and my father tried to contain his nervousness by reading the paper at a threatening decibel. We argued. We quarreled over silly things like who folded my socks, and there were certain moments when there simply wasn't anything to say. I realized that love isn't never quarreling or never being on edge. It's quarreling through those tough times and still loving each other. I promised myself that I would challenge myself hard, make the best of this opportunity, and stay in contact with my loved ones. I also promised myself that I would never again allow another person's fears dictate my life. While driving to the airport, I found myself glancing in the rearview mirror at my parents over and over. My dad had a beaming but cautionary expression, my mother's eyes were filled with uncried tears, and a wave of gratitude and sadness swept over me. I knew that taking that first step onto the plane, away from home, and into this new beginning was to be taking both my dreams and the burden of hard family expectations with me. But I also knew it was about choosing myself, believing in my worth, and taking the leap to pursue what I had strived so very hard for. I balanced the envelope on my lap, a folded-in rectangle, a tangible symbol of achievement and courage, and I realized that this moment, the start of Princeton, was the culmination of years and years of effort, dedication, and self-discovery. By the time I stepped onto campus, the elation, nervousness, and relief mixed into something almost impossibly indefinable. I went through the gates of Ivy, my suitcases trailing behind me, imagining the classes, the friends, the times ahead. And there, as well, I imagined my parents at home, probably worrying, probably proud in ways they did not yet know how to express. I knew that this was only the beginning. There would be tests, failings, and things to learn. But I also knew that I had made my own path, not selfishly, but because it needed to be done, and was courageous, and a means of honoring my own work. I understood now that sometimes loving your family involves making choices they will not understand, and sometimes loving yourself involves stepping into the life you have earned. As I unpacked my dorm room, I smiled to myself quietly, and breathed in deeply. I had known that this would be tough, with moments when I questioned everything, and that balancing the pressure of ambition with family obligations would be something that would continue to challenge me. But I also understood that I had taken one of the hardest choices of my life and had come out stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. I had learned that dreams matter, courage matters, and that love, though messy and sometimes ugly, can survive even the hardest decisions. And as I stood in my new bedroom, dreaming of the years to come, I knew that this moment, this decision, this leap into my life, was exactly what I had been waiting for, to take control of my own life and my own happiness.